In the fight against COVID-19, headlines daily highlight the lack of so-called PPE. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, by definition protects the individual person. However, the term PPE incorporates a range of different pieces of equipment. Respirators to protect against exposure by inhalation of hazardous substances, and gloves and clothing to protect the skin. Exposure to COVID-19 is primarily through two exposure routes: the inhalation route, where a proper rated respirator could make a big difference, and contact with mucous membranes, such as the mouth and nose, giving rise to infection. Contact with intact skin is not a primary route of exposure for COVID-19. Health and safety laws around the world are designed to protect workers from exposure to hazardous substances, and they invoke a hierarchy of controls. PPE is at the bottom of the hierarchy of control, the least effective and the last line of defense. Personal protective equipment, PPE, incorporates respiratory protective equipment, or RPE, proper rated respirators designed to protect the inhalation route of exposure. The use of RPE is described in regulations, where it describes what a respirator is and how respiratory protective equipment should be used. The term mask has come into common usage recently, but what exactly is a mask? There is a difference between a proper rated respirator, which is what health and safety laws demand, and a surgical mask or a homemade face covering. They're not the same. A surgical mask is not a rated respirator and is only PPE by a sort of limited definition. A lower specification rated but proper respirator, such as an FFP3 mask, may provide a protection factor against aerosol transmission of 100 times. A surgical mask, which is not a rated respirator, a factor of only 2. The performance of homemade masks is not really known. It will be interesting to know how much of the reported PPE has been suitable for really protecting the inhalation exposure pathway. Going back to the hierarchy of control, one can see that at the top of the hierarchy of control in a COVID-19 setting is engineering controls. That is, control or containment applied close to the action, designed to prevent exposure at source. Parties around the world are already having a go at delivering engineering controls in response to the COVID-19 crisis. Advanced engineering controls are common in industries where workers need to be protected from high hazard substances as laws demand. For example, they're used in high-tech pharmaceutical and biotech industries for protecting workers from some of the most hazardous substances in history. Engineering controls can be brought to bear in the COVID-19 crisis, provide a high degree of protection in some settings, and potentially relieve the pressure on PPE supply chains. Confounding information that indicates that engineering controls cannot be used should be revisited. Long-established companies with advanced manufacturing facilities sit ready to design and manufacture engineering controls that sit at the top of the hierarchy of control and which could provide a degree of protection that so-called PPE cannot deliver. Flexible containment systems use materials that do not intersect with PPE supply chains and which are in robust supply. Flexible containment engineering controls, the top of the hierarchy of control in the COVID-19 crisis. Shouldn't we be bringing everything to bear that we can to help protect people and save lives?